Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues and friends from Africa and around the world. My name is Inga Jacobs-Mata, the regional representative for the International Water Management Institute Southern Africa office based here in Pretoria. It's great to see so many of you joining this session, and I know many of you are still joining, but due to time, we will carry on with the session. I will be the convener for this World Water Week session on the role of water in transforming Africa's value chains. With me, I am also happy to introduce Dr. Robert Zugmour, the Africa Program Leader for the CGIAR's research program on climate change, agriculture, and food security. On behalf of the organizing partners, IMI, CCAFs, and the World Bank, I am pleased to welcome you to this super interactive session where we take a water systems approach to food systems transformation, and we'll be discussing the access, use, and management of water in Africa's agricultural value chains. We'll use the World Bank's AICCRA project, which stands for Accelerating the Impact of the CGIAR's Climate Research in Africa, as a case study. Today, we'll look at how water can be more sustainably managed in agricultural value chains through the enhanced delivery of climate information services, as well as the scaling of climate smart agriculture through innovative partnership models. By the end of this session, we hope to have generated an awareness about AICCRA, the multi-sectoral implications of scaling climate smart agriculture and enhancing climate information services, as well as the centrality of agricultural water management. We also hope to have built synergies with you and partners to elevate the positive impact of AICCRA in the three regions we are working in, which is East, West, and Southern Africa, and also in the 6 anchor countries, Senegal, Mali, Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Zambia. And finally, we hope to have gathered feedback on how we can catalyze on-the-ground investments in climate information and climate smart agriculture. In a few minutes from now, you will be hearing from our speakers who bring to the virtual table rich and diverse experiences and backgrounds. Please could you also introduce yourselves in the chat by typing your name, institution, and your country or city of location. Later in the program, we will also introduce all the panelists whom we welcome now and thank for their participation in this very important event. Your participation is a sign of your passion and your commitment to water, food, and land transformation in Africa. We're also thankful to several partners who will be facilitating the breakout discussions today, as well as the rapporteurs, and then Nicoline Lowe, our very own graphic recorder, who will have her camera enabled, and you'll see her frantically drawing away, capturing the recording, the plenary of the session in graphic format. She will be spotlighted from time to time, and by the end of the session, we will share what she has come up with as a graphic illustration of this session. Now, just a few housekeeping announcements before we start. The session will be recorded and made available after the session. Now, given the large attendance, large turnout today, we're taking steps to ensure a very productive session. And so as we begin, everyone except the speakers will be muted. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please use the chat function in Pathable. And it will be monitored by our colleague, Alison Rose, who will be our chat moderator for this session. We've also organized some polls on Pathable so that we can hear your thoughts, and we will continue later on with an interactive breakout session. In fact, let's try out the poll, if that's okay. If we could ask all the participants to please go to the poll function on your Pathable screen and answer the first 2 poll questions. The first being, what value chain or chains do you work in? And how is water used, managed, and accessed in these value chains? As you are providing your inputs to the polls, let me just carry on with a few other housekeeping rules. This session also offers translation in French in the plenary sessions only, not in the breakout sessions, unfortunately. But to make use of this service, you would need to download the AICCRA app from the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. Access the web app on your mobile device at app.interactio.io. Enter the event code WWWeek 2021. Plug in your headphones, open the app, and select the language channel. Listen to the interpretation on your phone while watching the video meeting through your computer. Then, to view the live transcript, click on the CC or close caption button in the menu tab and click on View Full Transcript or Show Subtitles. And then finally, we invite you to view related publications in the Files tab in Pathable for a whole host of reading material to the session. And we will come back to that also in a little while throughout the session. Then we invite you to engage on social media, and please, we ask you and encourage you to use the Twitter handles and hashtags as are now presented on your screen. So if I can just ask Razi to please share your screen to show us the results of the first two poll questions. Please go ahead, Razi. That's great. Thank you so much. So of course, we would have quite a number of you working in water, in irrigation. We have a few working in livestock, maize. We've got some working in olives, cassava, legumes, so very specific inputs. Thank you so much, everyone. And that's great. Razi, if you could please show the second poll, the second result, the results of the second poll rather, which is about how people see water being used, accessed, and managed in those value chains. Over to you, Razi. Thanks. Great, thank you so much. I see not that many responses, so please, we encourage you to keep on providing your inputs to this poll question, but I see many people, or at least a majority of you that responded, see groundwater as quite key in the different value chains, of course, irrigation. There are some that have mentioned pumping, crops, as well as washing. I'm interested to see what washing are you talking about? Is that washing of fruits and vegetables, or any other kind of washing? It would be interesting to hear your inputs. But please, thank you so much for that, Razi. And folks, please continue to provide your inputs to those two poll questions as we continue with the session. Great. I'm now going to share my screen again, and hopefully you can all see that. And without any further ado, I'm now going to hand it over to my co-convener, Robert, to introduce our first speaker. Robert, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Inga, for this wonderful introduction. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Martin van Nieuwkoop, who is the Global Director for the Agriculture and Food Global Practice at the World Bank. And this is to get the program started for today and provide an overview on the AICCRA project. As Global Director, Martin provides leadership to the formulation and implementation of the bank strategy and knowledge in agriculture and food. He oversees the operations of the bank vision on agriculture and food in regional and country programs. He acts as a senior spokesperson for agriculture and food, bank-wide and globally, and manages also the agriculture and food global practice. Just to say a few on this big man. And now, Martin, I want to give you the floor for your speech.
Well, very good. Thank you very much, Robert, for this very kind introduction. And also thanks, Inga. Good day to everybody, wherever you are. I have a presentation, and Inga, right now I see actually 2 slides on the screen, so you might actually want to double check, to make sure that we get, 1 slide, at a time. When Inga is fixing that, let me just say that I'm very pleased. Yeah, it's okay now, Inga, thanks. I'm very pleased to set the stage, for this very interesting session, I think, on accelerating agricultural innovation to enhance the resilience of African food systems in the face of climate change. I think, this is a very relevant, subject, for the Stockholm World Water Week. Next slide, please, Inga. Next slide. Yes, this one, yes. So let me start by saying, and I'm sure, that this not come as a surprise, to many of you, especially after the latest IPCC report that came out and that was released a week ago. That climate-related stressors are already a harsh reality, for farmers in Africa. For instance, the frequency of severe droughts in Africa has increased 5-fold, from every 12.5 years to once every 2.5 years. Also, pests and diseases are on the rise. And of course, the unprecedented locust outbreak that Africa is facing now is a clear manifestation of this. And of course, these climate-related stressors are already negatively impacting agriculture total factor productivity across the world, with Africa, as you can see on this map, particularly being affected. Next slide, please. Now, recognizing this, the World Bank Group recently adopted a new climate change action plan. That is seeking to step up financial support, to governments and the private sector, for bold action on climate mitigation and adaptation. So it seeks to make, climate finance smarter by improving and expanding climate diagnostics. It seeks to align, all the World Bank Group's operations with the Paris Agreement, and it puts forward, that success is being measured based on concrete results and impacts on the ground. Next slide, please. Now, the new climate change action plan, that was adopted in June this year, prioritizes transitions of 5 critical systems, and agriculture, food, water, and land use transition is one of these. And as part of this transition, the bank will increasingly engage on climate smart agriculture, nature-based solutions, carbon sinks, food loss and waste, and of course, more specifically related to water. Both the blue economy as well as water for agriculture as a critical dimension or as critical dimensions of the food system transition. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to the World Bank approach to agriculture water management, a 2-pronged approach has been adopted. And this 2-pronged approach, seeks to balance, on the one hand, increased access for the sake of ensuring global food security, with reduced impacts, for the sake of ensuring global water security. So based on this 2-pronged approach are 4 major areas of engagement which relate to more resilient water access. Are 4 major areas of engagements, okay? And these relate to more resilient water access in rain-fed systems, number 1. Enhanced water use efficiency in existing irrigation systems, number 2. Expansion of farmer-led irrigation. And number 4, more effective cross-sectoral policy alignment for enhanced water security. Well, particularly the last one, of course, sounds pretty complicated, but it relates to, for instance, to fixed minimum prices and public procurement of outputs, which encourage farmers to grow water-intensive crops in already water-stressed areas. I mean, think, for instance, about rice in the Punjab in India as an example of that. Next slide, please. Now, an important reflection on the need for building improved resilience of agriculture production food systems in the face of climate change is that for a very long time, agriculture innovation and R&D has been focusing on productivity gains without explicitly considering resilience. Also, R&D is a public good, of course, and countries tend to underinvest in it, as of course the free rider principle applies. And the bank has recognized this, I mean, very early on, and was one of the founders of the consultative group of international agricultural research, the CGIAR, 50 years ago, with the aim to foster and support increased investment in agriculture R&D. Next slide, please. Now, the bank continues to be an important supporter of the CGIAR until to date. And in fact, at the Climate Action Summit in 2019, 2 years ago almost, it announced to increase its support to it. I mean, this commitment planted the seeds for the accelerating the impacts of climate research for Africa project, AICCRA project, which we are discussing today. The AICCRA project is lifting the partnership between the World Bank and the CGIAR to a new level. I mean, before AICCRA, the World Bank merely provided financing to the CGIAR system, which was of course important and it continues to be so. But with AICCRA, the World Bank and the CGIAR are joining hands when it comes to the implementation of concrete activities and are holding joint accountability when it comes to the generation of results and impacts. Next slide, please. So the AICCRA projects, I mean, seek to increase access to agricultural research and extension providers in Africa to knowledge, technologies, and decision-making tools that are generated by the CGIAR's research program on climate change, agriculture, and food security, CCAFS. I mean, this research program cuts across all CGIAR centers. And by doing so, the project is aiming to accelerate the development and application of climate smart agriculture innovations. Next slide, please. So the AICCRA project includes 3 components that are interrelated and reinforce each other. I mean, so there's one component, as you can see on the slide, on knowledge generation and sharing with a focus on the development of climate-informed agriculture advisory services and decision-making tools. There's a second component focusing on the strengthening of partnerships for the delivery of climate-smart agriculture innovations in African agriculture. And then there is a third component that concerns the validation of climate-smart agriculture innovations, I mean, to piloting. Next slide, please. Now, to maximize the impact, the envisaged impact of the project, I mean, the AICCRA project is deploying a 3-pronged implementation strategy. I mean, first of all, it covers 3 critical agroecological zones in Africa, including the West African and Sahelian drylands. I mean, the East African drylands to lowlands to highlands, and thirdly, the Southern African drylands. So that's one. And then second, the project activities are concentrated in 6 anchor countries, I mean, who have good implementation capacity and strong political and financial commitment, among others. And thirdly, the project is actively seeking spillover effects into neighboring countries through explicit institutional tie-ups with relevant regional networks and institutions. Next slide. And that's my last slide. And as part of this comprehensive approach, I mean, towards improving resilience in the face of climate change, I mean, the AICCRA project seeks to actively contribute to the water agenda in Africa by turning around, I mean, some of the common beliefs about water resources and use in Africa, and seeking to capture the opportunities that reflect the reality on the ground. And I think it's very interesting that in this respect, the project approaches water scarcity as more of a dynamic problem. I mean, that varies in space and in time, and that within those dynamics, there is scope for interventions that could improve access to water in a reliable fashion. So this is from my side, I mean, to set the scene. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Robert and Inga, and I'm looking forward, I mean, to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin, for this very clear message from the World Bank. And indeed, as you said in your last slide, climate adaptation requires unlocking of water access. That's really important. And some of the projects focusing on achieving scale, such as AICCRA project, draw attention to the need for a system approach to achieving tangible food, land, water transformation on the ground. Really thank you very much for this very concise presentation. Now, let's move on into the two-part panel discussion. And to do that, I would like to ask my colleague, Inga, to take us from here. Thanks. Inga, over to you.
Yes, thanks so much, Robert, and thanks especially to Martin for so eloquently articulating the goals and objectives of AICCRA, and for also emphasizing the role that water plays in food systems transformation. So as Robert mentioned, we now continue in this vein to engage several partners and stakeholders in this two-part panel discussion. The panelists have a diverse background, some from the private sector, some from research for development, working either on the AICCRA project in different countries, but also new stakeholders that we hope to partner with. We have 8 panelists who will be divided into 2 groups. And the first part will focus on the value of water systems, the value of a water systems approach or a value chain approach in better managing water access, use, and management in these ag value chains. To the audience out there, please share your questions and your comments in the chat, and we will bring that into the discussion after the first round of panelist inputs. I'd now like to invite the first group of panelists to switch on their cameras, if that's okay, and welcome to the virtual stage, Dr. Rachel McDonald, DDG of IMI. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Petra Schmitter, Senior Irrigation Specialist at the Water Global Practice of the World Bank, Dr. Ana Maria Lobo Guerrero, Research Director of Climate Action at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and International Center for Tropical Agriculture, and lastly, Dr. Giriraj Amarnath, Principal Researcher for Disaster Risk Management and Climate Resilience, and the Research Group Leader at the International Water Management Institute. Also, everyone, for your information, we have a speaker profiles PDF document also loaded in the files tab in Pathable, so you can read up a little bit more about these panelists, but wonderful to have you all join us. Great to see you, to see you all again. If I could ask Rachel to please kick us off. Rachel, you come from an R4D organization. What do you think is the value of a water systems lens in understanding food systems transformation? And tell us a bit about what IMI is doing in this regard.
Thank you, Inga, and it's a great pleasure to join this session. Thank you, Martin, for highlighting the various dimensions to solutions to climate change adaptation and in agricultural water management, which all demand that sort of cross-thinking. At the recent UN Food Systems Summit, the pre-summit, there was a resounding demand for systems thinking to tackle the challenges for providing enough food for future populations that does not come at the expense of biodiversity, basic human rights, and of course, water resources. This came out through many of the different speakers. Climate change impacts will demand, we think, even more about interlinkages, feedbacks, and tipping points across our many different influences and systems that are in our solutions development. As we have heard in the various stakeholder dialogues of the AICCRA project so far, these impacts of climate change are already being felt in East, South, and West Africa, and we've already seen what are the focus countries for that, but we can understand why those focus countries are there. Our stakeholders in those stakeholder dialogues have highlighted that there is a need to think about and tackle challenges, not just in terms of the impacts of climate change, but we need to also to take on board the many root causes for the vulnerabilities, many of which are often systemic. So this is where systems thinking is essential. So what do we mean by systems thinking? The definition that underlies the work that's being undertaken under the AICCRA project is that systems thinking is a holistic approach to analysis. We take the big picture that focuses on the way that different parts of the systems interrelate, and then how systems work over time and within the context of much larger systems. So here at this particular World Water Week session, we are here to think of the different constituent parts of water, food, and land systems. And we think not only how they interrelate, but also how climate change is already affecting in those African countries, the way those systems are working. That climate change, variability and extremes, what we see is a resulting change in growing seasons, extreme heat, droughts, floods, pests, all that have already been highlighted by Martin, are already affecting the constituent parts of those systems and how those interrelationships manifest themselves, how they play out. So what we need to do in the AICCRA project, there are lots of questions that are emerging. Where, how, and what crops can be grown, what, where, and type of disaster risk management is needed to help farmers and water managers recover from those climate extremes. We can't stop those climate extremes, but how can we speed up and help the management and the mitigation of their impacts? And also, what are the policies, safety nets, incentives, and the governance that's needed to drive change and regulate those resources so we do manage across the different systems that we're managing here? In the development of climate-smart agriculture, which is a critical part of AICCRA, we must have water at its heart. As Mark Smith, the EME DG, recently wrote, while some crops have been grown without soil, no crop has ever been grown without water. So that is why we need to bring this water systems lens. So an important part of the discussions for this AICCRA session is to consider the different water systems part. Groundwater, surface water, reused water, the movements of those water systems, the many demands on these precious resources, as well as the political, economic, and social systems in which these are situated, those food, land, and water systems are situated, alongside the other component parts of agriculture value chains for that climate resilience to be accelerated. The CG centres involved with AICCRA will be working with our critical national partners to think beyond traditional siloed individual boundaries of water, food, and land systems to bring integrated thinking and solution development that can bring that climate change adaptation. Here at EME, we look at water systems in terms of not only the resource, but what are those influences on the way that is being used? How can we bring systems and solutions and policies and practices that can bring more efficiency, a better sharing of the system, but how we can then look at those agriculture systems within the much bigger water systems where we have water for people, water for commerce, water for sanitation, and how we can then bring it together. So at EME, we look across water, food, and ecosystems. We look at water disaster management, but we also see water as an incredible component of water growth and inclusion. And we can see that that thinking and across those systems is important to bring to this AICCRA project and more generally at Stockholm Water Week. Back to you, Inga, for this.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And I'm glad you mentioned the CGIAR partners, because I think the one CGIAR is really being encouraged and challenged, you know, CGIAR partners in this big reform process that we are currently all involved in, really is encouraging CG partners to think in this kind of systems way, reimagining what food, land, and water systems transformation looks like in different regions. So thank you for that, for highlighting that, Rachel. Let's move on now to our second panelist, Petra. Petra, you come from a slightly different angle, and I'd like to find out from you now how we can apply this value chain approach to irrigation. It's one that is very much complementary to a water systems approach that Rachel mentioned. So just tell us how we can apply a value chain approach and how can that help to address water-related risks along these different ag value chains. Thanks.
Thanks, Inga. Let me pick up where Rachel mentioned the complexity of it all, and therefore also the water risks that come in many forms and that can affect any of the agricultural value chains and its actors in different ways. And therefore, everyone will strive to minimize their risk. So when we think of water, we need to intersect agricultural value chains with the interconnected scales from farm to basin. So my first example is at the farm level. With ongoing weather uncertainty, agriculture will need some sort of irrigation. So we observe that farmers are already investing in water to support their farming systems, and that these farmer-led investments in irrigation are very much informed by their water needs and the markets for which they produce. And therefore, supporting smallholder climate adaptation will depend very much on the functioning of these agricultural value chains and the ability to overcome barriers that prevent farmers from investing in these water solutions. So therefore, as Martin already mentioned at the World Bank, we see that unlocking water in this case follows a value chain approach, which means supporting off-taker markets, access to extension, irrigation supply chains, and innovative finance, very much at the heart of AICCRA. And secondly, the water allocations to actors within and across basins will change because of governments' responses to droughts. And we're all well too aware of what's happening in the Colorado River right now. So what farmers grow and for which markets and at which risks determines their water demand, more so than irrigation methods per se. And the importance of assessing trade-offs to water allocation within value chains and across scales will only increase in the future. So we often end up focusing on enhancing water efficiency at the farm level, but we don't always see those efforts translated more into the basin scale and meeting all the water demands. So here also, we believe that a value chain approach could support not only the identification of trade-offs, but also the incentives for improved water and energy use from farm to fork. So to finish, I would like to end with saying that to envision agricultural water management, we need to see it as a dominant risk mitigation strategy in value chains, as it cuts out the largest production risks. But we also need to integrate it with the other risk management mechanisms that we all talk about here today in a holistic approach to manage our water throughout the value chain. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Petra, and really Petra is one of the champions of farmer-led irrigation. So it's great to see how that also links into the work of the World Bank. Great, I'm going to have to move on quickly, so I'm going to ask the speakers just to keep it brief. Our next speaker, Dr. Ana Maria Lobo Guerrero. Anna, you are central to you have been central to the conceptualization and now implementation of AICCRA, which is the way I look at it. It's a scaling project. You know, we're doing what other projects are doing, but we're doing it at scale. We're scaling up, we're scaling out, we're scaling deep, and how can we scale up solutions that produce more food and fiber using less water, and how can the different sectors take more responsibility for their impact on people, land, and water?
Thank you very much, Inga, for that question. So, as you said, AICCRA, it's mainly set up to respond to this scaling question. So, how can we make the products of cutting-edge CGR-led science available throughout Africa so that many Africans can benefit from this science? And the way that we have addressed this in AICCRA is through thinking about three main pathways for reaching this scale. And Martin talked about this, but I'm going to connect to specific examples that we are doing on the ground. So the first pathway, it's in relation to knowledge generation and sharing. Very important to reach a scale. What are we doing right now through AICCRA? We are developing these integrated agricultural data hubs. And the idea of these hubs is to be able to disseminate advisories to farmers and bundle these with another type of information, such as water services, for example, and dissemination systems for early warning. So we believe that this is key information for scaling. Also, through AICCRA, we are developing these flood and drought monitoring indicators and very, very contributing to the generation of high-resolution subseasonal rainfall forecasts. The second pathway, in order to reach scale, it's in relation to partnerships for delivery. Partnerships are fundamental to reaching this scale. What are we doing in AICCRA? We are setting up these multidisciplinary working groups, which include the Med Services departments from the countries, the Agricultural Research Institutes, the Extension Services Department, and CGR scientists. And the idea is that all of us together, we are going to contribute to sustain production of agrometeorological advisories for African farmers throughout the season. The third pathway, in order to reach this scale, it's in relation to the validation of climate smart agriculture through piloting. And here we are doing something really, really interesting. We are developing these climate smart agricultural technology packages. So it's not just thinking about one practice or technology, is thinking about how to reach that scale. And the idea is through this combination, through these packages, we are able to improve smallholder farmers' livelihoods. Just to give you a concrete example, we are exploring and understanding the bundle between sustainable finance and off-grid solar irrigation. And let me just give me 5 seconds to reply to your last question, Inga, because I think that it's totally fundamental. How can different sectors take more responsibility for their impacts? And I think that in here, the key word is communications. We need to provide information that can offer more stories that provide hope, where ordinary people are leading exciting initiatives, because this is what is happening on the ground. Stories that are close to people. We need from the scientific research to provide to the social media information that can make people become part of the solution, so that we all understand that climate change adaptation and mitigation is also in our hands. We need information that can educate and that can really become a call for action. And also, we need to generate the information that can move people to request more aggressive action from politicians and decision makers. So communication is going to be key, and it is key so that sectors can take more responsibility on these impacts. Thank you, Inga. Back to you.
Great. Thank you, Ana Maria. And you've also hit the nail on the head when you said, it's not just about scaling climate information or climate smart agriculture, it's actually the integration of these two. And so that's actually a great segue to our next panelist, Giriraj. Giriraj, you work at this coal face, right, where climate risk meets digital innovation. How has digital innovation helped improve our understanding of the way in which water is accessed, used, or managed in these value chains? But for me, more importantly, is how has it changed behavior, right? Because, I mean, anybody can talk about the great impact, but we're talking about behavioral change on the ground. Share with us, if you can, in very briefly, yes, just a quick example, please, Giriraj. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Inga. I think the previous panel members have spoken in clear and in length. Speaking of digital innovation, if we look at today's modern technologies and tools can really help smallholder farmers directly in terms of the climate services that the governments are providing in addition to the private sector. Like if we speak of climate services through the digital innovation is all about weather and climate services, reaching out to the farmers, providing risk insurance program by the private sectors, and also ensuring it's a data-driven agriculture services we are talking about. There were times we were looking at macro product. Today we are talking about a village-specific weather forecast, village-specific climate insurance services to not just on the weather data, but also enhancing the agriculture practices, whether it is a farm-led irrigation, timely knowing when to irrigate, when to supply water in areas where it is a arid region where we are looking at deficit rainfall. You can provide timely early warning to early action. And again, today we have seen a lot of mega initiatives have come connecting the dots, early warning to early finance. Now people are looking at data as a fundamental in the process. Now you can also look at the time where IPCC have come from 50-kilometer grid data to now they are talking about 10-kilometer gridded data. Like we are coming up with very high resolution information because thanks to the digital innovation, whether it is a big data, whether it is machine learning models, all are become very handy. So the backend systems are robust and powerful in the years to come. And we see through the AICCRA project, the flood and drought indicators, the early warning information are going to reach out to the policymakers. It's going to look at accelerating what the bottom-up process we are trying to look in the years to come. So in terms of behavioral, you are rightly mentioned about, I can give very brief example on the work we do on bundle solutions where we package insurance, seeds, and climate information. We have a lot of phone calls coming from the farmers in Sri Lanka saying that your weather forecast was time enough to save irrigating the water, right? So irrigating the water excess means also safeguarding your surface water, groundwater depletion. So I think, again, providing climate services is very important, timely, and customizing through telecom services like SMS data, etc. I think farmers are realizing that the science is forefront for them, because with the climate variability, it's not possible for us to say seasons are going to look like that. With huge changes in the climate pattern, it is important that we believe the science, we believe our digital data. It is also time for us to customize those applications to the tailored need of those community. And I think AICCRA is a very unique project in the sense we are blending CIS and CSA portfolio into one spectrum of research where farmers are seeing that as an integrated product rather than a silo-driven solution. So I think with that, I stop here, and thank you for giving this opportunity.
Thanks, Giriraj. So I think you've also highlighted something. It's about going from early warning to early finance and then early action. You know, so that sort of steps, you know, that that early warning systems provide. And I think it's important that we do put an emphasis on those steps as well. It's not just about, you know, developing all of these big data systems and so on. Thanks for that, Giriraj, and thank you to our first part of the panel. It's really becoming increasingly important to manage resources, water, land, energy, even at this interaction. So thank you all once again. Great. I'm now going to ask or provide any innovations, products, services which depend on water access and storage, and what are the challenges and opportunities to scaling these. So let me start then with JF. We're working with you in Zambia, in fact, on AICCRA. Please share with us your reflections. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. So the EDGE project is actually very interesting, is that it's not by design a climate smart or sustainable water design program. We're a program designed to support small medium agriculture SMEs that work in 3 provinces and across 6 value chains. So we have honey, we have poultry, aquaculture, horticulture, mostly annual vegetable and fruit. We have groundnuts and animal feed, but mostly their ingredients. And we do this in 3 provinces of Zambia with very varied, I would say, ecosystems. And just to keep this in mind, this is a rain-fed, mostly agricultural system. The country's undergone several shocks and stresses in terms of drought, in terms of flood over the years. And our SMEs are very much aware of the need to sustainably manage water. In this context, we are very much happy to partner with AICCRA and also, you know, Rent to Own, who's on this program, because we do not have the solutions ourselves. We need to outsource and leverage the expertise. And based on the recent baseline survey that we conducted with 309 SMEs, we have a target of 450. Around these questions, you'll find it interesting. We at least had 36 to 45% of our SMEs to a very extent confirming that lack of water availability and climate change poses a serious, not just a risk, a serious risk to their business. In this context as well, moving beyond constraints, we've also, on the technical assistance side, the SMEs have overwhelmingly anywhere from 76 to 80%. So 3 out of 4 of our current cohort is looking for solutions around information services, water solutions, and around CSA best practices. As we're not equipped to do so ourselves, as far as scaling and finding innovations, we partner with a multiplicity of actors. We've drawn in Rent to Own, who's on this panel, to look at equipment subsidy provision for appropriate technologies such as solar pumps and others to be able to deal with this obviously rain-fed system, which requires a lot of borehole or shallow well operations for the commodities to grow. We've also partnered with other organizations that touch not strictly on water, but around waste management and disposal. where we draw that expertise at a very low cost to free to work with our SMEs to build this culture. We've also worked with IMI, and I think we're hoping that the SMEs that we've identified to you, we're able to bring answers to some of the questions so that we can partner together around spreading the joy of the bundles that you'll bring to Zambia. Some of the challenges have been identified are not just in primary ag, they're also in secondary ag. And while not directly linked to water, they have to do with unreliable electricity sources, for example, which call for a need for us to look strategically at renewable energy and resources to be brought into both primary and secondary ag. So I think on this front, I mean, I could leave it there. I'd prefer to let the other panelists to speak, but just a bit of a pitch. We're looking for any partners around research, academia, access to finance. We're looking at folks providing index-based insurance to be able to bring down the risk of those SMEs we try to bring access to finance to. And we're looking also to have any kind of impact investors with a great CSR mentality to join us in our efforts to not just grow these businesses, but to make sure that they buy into this culture of water management and so that we can scale it together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. You said many things that I'd like to have, another hour discussion on. But I think the sort of the power of partnerships in implementing this value chain approach is a key one. And certainly we look forward to working with ACDI VOCA and EDGE in implementing an accelerator grant for SMEs in scaling climate smart ag and climate information services in Zambia. Great stuff. Thank you so much. Let's stick with Zambia, stick with how we're scaling solar irrigation, and move now to Mark. Mark, please share some reflections from your side. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Inga. So Rent-to-Own, we've been providing solar water pumps in Zambia to informal irrigation farmers for about 5 years now. We've been in existence since 2010, and we've been able to get over 95% repayment rate, suggesting just how important this technology is to these farmers. So repayment rates are up and solid, but profitability remains a challenge. I think Jeff mentioned it, but the ability to have a subsidy at this stage where the technology's at, and where where I think the volatility of the economy and the environment we're working in is at, becomes very difficult to reach that profitability point. So a bit more about our customers though. So most of them start out with some form of a petrol pump or a generator driving a submersible pump. And that creates a problem because now their fuel expenses become one of their biggest expenses on a monthly basis. So, and also the guys who are using surface water, maybe they have a shallow well or a stream, they also are struggling because those shallow wells are becoming drier. They have to dig deeper every year, and those streams are going dry in the driest parts of the year. So drilling boreholes has become more and more, I would say, almost essential for anyone doing irrigation, unless you're along like a major body of water that's on the surface. So the challenge still remains that these fuel-driven pumps are more accessible because they have a lower startup costs. However, we do see some emerging tech that allows farmers to buy maybe a solar pump where you can start out with one solar panel, add another one, and slowly get to the size and capacity that you're after. So that's getting better. And that's fairly new. The other thing that we see an opportunity for is really, I can't remember who mentioned it, but I think everybody maybe, is the partnership. So a lot of the farmers have, the good thing is that almost every farmer, once they have irrigation, are able to make money from it. So it is a major advantage once you do have irrigation in place. However, deciding which crops to grow and finding a market for that product before it goes bad remains a major challenge. So there does seem to be a real opportunity for farmers, equipment, providers, financiers, and off-takers to all partner together to de-risk for everyone and create a better outcome. So there's a lot of challenges behind creating such a partnership, but we do see that as an opportunity as well. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for that, Mark, and for raising, the real issues on the ground from a business perspective, profitability, access to capital. But also nice to hear that businesses are innovating and providing different, baskets of offerings, service offerings in that regard. Great. Thank you so much. Let's move then now to a different region, to West Africa, and specifically Mali, and the work that Elliot is doing there under AICCRA. In rice value chain, specifically smart water management. Elliot, please share with us some of your experiences there.
Thanks a lot, Inga. Mali is a rice basket in West Africa, providing about 15% of the regional production, but the country is also highly vulnerable to climate change. Occurrence of drought and flooding have amplified during the last decades and are negatively affecting the livelihood of the population, much of which depends on small-scale farming. So in Mali, we are working on rice and associated speculation value chains, meaning rice, legume, vegetable, fish, and tree. And we aim to reach at least 250,000 men and women farmers and improve their resilience to climate change. So we are doing this in partnership with other city centers, with the national partners, but also with the private sector. And our work expands the three main components of the AICCRA Mali project. I'm not going to go into detail to that because Martin very well presented that section. In terms of water management, we are working both at the fields and landscape levels, and we have identified the major water-related stress in the different rice production systems. And these are water scarcity in irrigated lowlands, drought and flooding in rain-fed lowlands, drought in rain-fed uplands, and flooding in the submergence system. So we are developing and promoting using inclusive business models, technology to improve the resilience of farmers, particularly water harvesting techniques, low-cost and participatory water harvesting techniques, combined with solar irrigation to upgrade the rain-fed sites to irrigated sites. We are also working on water-saving technologies, particularly the system of rice intensification, the alternate wetting and dry, the alternate crop establishment methods, such as the dry direct seeded and the wet direct seeded rice, to improve the resilience of farmers to water scarcity in irrigated lowlands. In the rain-fed upland, we are promoting the use of drought-tolerant varieties combined with supplemental irrigation where it is possible. And in the submergence system, we are working on submergence-tolerant varieties combined with alternative crop establishment methods. So we are also enhancing the delivery of climate information services, particularly the providing information on the timing of drought, on the timing of flooding, on mapping water stress in order actually to direct the technology to the most affected people. So again, we are doing this using actually inclusive business model, involving all the partners, all the stakeholders to make sure that actually we use a participatory approach that will really increase the buy-in of the technology. So that's in a nutshell what I could say. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Elliot. Sorry, I have to jump in just in the interest of time. But again, inclusive business models and the sort of the strength and importance of partnerships is really what's making your work so successful in Mali. Thank you for that. Folks, let's move on to the last panelist, Kindi. Kindi will share with us some reflections from Ethiopia and in a very different value chain. So Kindi, please, over to you. For your inputs. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Inga. I would like to share with you the wheat value chain in Ethiopia, which is an important crop in Ethiopia traditionally. And normally Ethiopia annually consumes 7 million metric tons, of which 5 million metric tons is produced locally, whereas the remaining 2 million metric tons is imported. So despite all that, the demand is increasing because of an increasing population size. So Ethiopia is heavily investing on wheat these days. And the government has decided to be wheat self-sufficient in 5 years' time, starting from 2020. And there is a lot of effort now. A new system is coming up. Normally, close to 2 million hectares of wheat is produced under rain-fed conditions in the country. But lately, the government is deciding to take wheat to the lowland areas where most of it is irrigated. So the irrigation system is coming up. But when we look at the rain-fed system, this is mostly a system whereby meeting the crop or feeding the crop to the water availability period is the most important one. And that determines the performance of the productivity of wheat in general. So our effort in this area is to provide critical information that is needed to match the crop to the water availability period, which is important for the farmer to get at least a good crop. And what we've been doing so far is that, I think, which is very similar to what Elliot presented, that we're providing both seasonal and pre-seasonal information that will help the farmer and to feed this crop to the water availability period, which is normally variable from season to season, from year to year. And what we came up as an innovation is that providing the information alone is not enough, because there are also value chain actors who should be involved in that. For example, if we provide the farmer to get this kind of variety that you need to grow this year, then that variety has to be provided by the seed companies. If we provide the farmer to use fertilizer, then that fertilizer has to be provided by the fertilizer companies. And if we say that you have to irrigate this, then it has to be provided by the other value chain actors. So, and also there is a need for finance. So what we came up with is a one-stop service for farmers, whereby value chain actors, farmers, credit providers, interact through a digital platform whereby farmers can buy online easily, whatever they like, so long as they get the information. So that information is coming from a collaboration of different actors, the private sector, the public sector, whereas also the CG centers involved in that. And then we created this platform, and that platform allows everybody to access the climate information at any time, and also the farmers to get that information and then to get access directly to the inputs they want from that. So this allows all actors to act together in a very seamless way through that platform. And that platform is shaping up, and we are now already piloted it with wheat in Ethiopia, and it's going so far so well. And we want to go down to also to the lowland wheat production areas, which is now coming up in many ways. And in that case, one of the critical factors that we provide always is the water efficient system that the different actors need to get involved in that. So the only challenge that we have so far is that in most cases, we've got that in Ethiopia, most of the farmers are illiterate. So providing these digital services to little uneducated farmers is a little bit of a challenge. And we are working that through the available extension agents. And also, bringing all this together is not easy. So coordination is a little bit of a challenge, but we are trying to solve that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Kindi, and perfect timing there. Thanks for the inputs. Just commend also your work on precision data, precision tools, and the sort of context-specific approach that you're taking in Ethiopia. Thank you for that. Thank you to the panel. Really, we had to keep it brief. I apologize for that, but I think you've all provided very thought-provoking inputs for the breakout session to follow. So thank you so much once again. I'll now hand it over to Robert to introduce the next poll. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take many questions and comments due to just the time constraints that we're under. But Robert, if I can ask you to just introduce the poll and we can integrate that into the breakout session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Inga. And again, thank very much to all the panelists. Wow, that was really a very insightful session. Nothing to add. You can just see the diversity of value chains, approaches, partnership. It says that all these need water to operate and be scaled to benefit the farmers and others. So that's fantastic. So let me introduce the next poll. You can go to the Pathable tab and then click on the poll. You will see the two questions. What do you think about the theme that you think are required for more discussion and that should be prioritized in the breakout discussion? And the second question is about the key take-home messages for you from this session. So we won't show the result because of the time constraint, but please go and answer to these questions. Now I hand over to Inga again for the next session. Inga, over to you.
Great, thank you so much for that, Robert. And again, colleagues facilitating the breakout sessions, please make sure that you go to that poll and look at the results so that we can pull them into the relevant breakout sessions. We appreciate your feedback, everybody on the call. Great, so now we're going to move into a more interactive part of the session. And we now move into 3 breakout discussion groups. You can vote with your fingers by clicking on which breakout group you'd like to join. And if I can ask the facilitators to briefly switch on their cameras, please, and give us a quick wave so that the audience knows who you are, that would be great. The first breakout group will be facilitated by Alison Rose of IRI, Columbia University, Enhanced Delivery of Climate Information Services. The second breakout discussion on scaling climate smart agriculture will be facilitated by our colleague AICCRA from IITA. And then the third breakout session will be facilitated by our colleague Lalsige Dester of the Alliance for Biodiversity and SIAT. And that discussion will be on partnerships for delivery of climate information and climate smart agriculture. So I see AICCRA on the screen, and let's see if, oh, Lalsige is there, great. Alison is also there, wonderful. Thank you so much, colleagues. Now we will have to keep the session quite brief, unfortunately, just due to time, but we're asking each facilitator to facilitate a discussion on how is water used, accessed, managed currently from the perspective of your topic. Climate information services, climate smart agriculture, and then partnerships. We encourage you to share examples from your own experience. What are the challenges and opportunities of scaling water-focused innovations in these value chains that you work in? And what are the drivers and barriers to adoption? And then finally, where water has an indirect focus, I think JF mentioned this quite well, where there is an indirect focus, what can and should be done to have water management dimensions more clearly prioritized? Those are the questions we encourage you to discuss in your breakout. You will have 15 minutes now, no longer 20 minutes, unfortunately. But we now, I hope the breakout rooms are enabled, Corin, so people can click on the breakout session button at the bottom of the screen. And we will use mural as well as verbal dialogues. So in the chat, Alison will just post the links to the mural boards that we ask you to populate and share in the breakout sessions. So with that, then we wish you all a wonderful and interactive session. Thanks so much. Everyone, welcome back, everyone. That was really way too short, and apologies for that. I don't even know if you were able to reach all of the questions, but we are running on the clock, and so I do apologize. We ran a little bit out of time with the panel discussion, so apologies for that. But we do have very strict time limits in this room with CW, so apologies again. But I hope that you were at least able to start a conversation on the different topics, and please continue with the conversations in the chat if that's possible. I'd like to now turn to each group. Let's see if you were able to cover at least one or two of the questions. And if I could ask, let me hear from Alison. Alison, in terms of the enhanced delivery of climate information, were you able to get to anything of substance?
Yeah, you know, we didn't have much time, but we did talk. Well, here we were able to hear a little bit from some colleagues. So we talked a little bit about, you know, how water is managed either through rain-fed agriculture or irrigation. We talked a little bit about how water can be managed more sustainably, and I thought there were Elliot, who was one of the panelists, also gave a little bit more detail. I thought was interesting, talking about how we need to have a landscape approach with water. So considering both upstream and downstream issues. And, you know, I'm sure that speaks a bit to this holistic approach and you know, needing this landscape approach. We also mentioned governance.
Sorry. Okay, sorry, Alison. We're really we'll get kicked out of the sessions. I'm really going to have to move along. But thank you very much for that. I did hear you that the governance inputs there. Let me then move to our next breakout group, which was facilitated by AICCRA. AICCRA, please, in less than 60 seconds, could you give us some feedback on your discussion?
Yes, as we didn't do much because I think people had a bit of challenge with using the mural, but what we found more on the status quo, what is currently being done and happening. And one of the key things we found was that water access remains a challenge in many areas for agricultural use. And people are still adding additional ideas. So that is what I can say for now.
Great, thanks, AICCRA. And exactly that. Please, colleagues and friends, please continue to populate the different mural boards. We will keep them open for some time, and they will be a key input for this session to the World Water Week proceedings. So thank you. Let's then move to the last group. Lalsaged, some feedback from your side.
Okay, thanks, Inga. So we are trying to address the first two questions. And the first one was on partnership is our focus. So engaging the private sector, banks, loaning agents, NGOs, and so on will be crucial to facilitate the partnership. Linking the demand and supply was one of the key interventions. And also it was stated that innovations are context specific. So our partnership will also consider that specificity so that we are more successful. And there was an issue of wetlands, which was raised, wetlands being exploited as water sources, and that will be a serious challenge and a need to handle those complications. And also water harvesting structures, to supplement water. There are efforts to promote water supporting supplementary structures. And the government engagement is not significant in some parts of the region. So there is a need to promote those engagements. Sorry, we had a challenge to use the thing, so we just discussed on orally. Thanks.
That's great. That's okay. That's okay. But we will keep the, like I said, the mural boards open. So thank you for that. Alison, I think you have posted the mural links in the chat. So colleagues, please feel free to click on those mural links and share your inputs in those 3 different mural boards. That would be great. Thank you. And then, you know, while we are closing out, I'm going to hand over to Katie from the World Bank in a little while to provide the closing remarks. But we would appreciate your inputs to the 4th poll, which is again in Pathable. What for you were some of the key take-home messages from this session? Besides, of course, that the breakout sessions were way too short, but we'd value your inputs to that poll as well. Great. With that, I'm going to hand over now to Katie to summarize the session. And Katie, you have 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inga. So I will cut what I was going to say very short. But I wanted to start off by expressing my thanks on behalf of the World Bank and the AICCRA project for the opportunity to participate in the organization of the session. I'm excited to support the implementation of the AICCRA project for the World Bank side. And if this session is any indication, the project will be collaborative, innovative, and very well executed. I wanted to thank our GP director, Martin van Newcombe, for introducing the session, Inga, for doing the heavy lifting of the organization, and to all of the wonderful panelists for participating and the participants and sharing your insights. The reason that the World Bank and AICCRA felt it was so important to organize this session is that the World Bank views climate change as the single most important threat to agricultural development and improving water management. And it's a critical part of the climate smart agriculture agenda in sub-Saharan Africa and worldwide. And in that context, very quickly, there were 3 reoccurring themes throughout the session that struck me as particularly important. Related to the climate information services, we heard from many of the panelists about the centrality, specifically of early warning systems with things like integrated data hubs, flood and drought, early warning systems, and smart systems that provide information on when to supply water and irrigate. Secondly, we heard about the need to integrate scaling up climate smart agriculture with climate information systems. We heard from panelists about the way that they're thinking about scaling CSA, including things like packages for smallholder farmers, solar irrigation, drilling boreholes, inclusive business models, water harvesting technologies, intensification models, and many, many others. We also heard about how important it is to link information services with scale up of CSA, climate information systems to help actors connect the dots, helping to link early warning systems to early finance. As one of the panelists said, with the connection of these 2 things, AICCRA can be an integrated project instead of a siloed solution. And then third, very quickly, thinking about the partnerships for delivery. We heard Anna Maria talk about how partnerships are critical for scaling. We heard Mark talk about how critical partnerships are between farmers and businesses on the ground. And Martine at the beginning mentioned the long history of collaboration between the CGIA group and the World Bank. The AICCRA project takes this a whole step further. It's a unique opportunity to join the research priorities of the CGIAR group and the operational mandate of the World Bank. We saw this already happening. Last week, the AICCRA team met with the World Bank Ghana team on the ground to discuss priorities and possible collaboration. The partnership under this project will allow World Bank operations, both ongoing and those under development, to benefit from the CGIAR Center's research on scaling up CSA, including important work on irrigation, climate, and water management. The session has been very valuable in highlighting all of these things and underscoring the work that's going on in Africa to address them, including the many strong partnerships with the CGIAR Center's regional and national partners. The World Bank, through the AICCRA project, is very happy to be able to support increasingly urgent work on improving water management in Africa's agricultural value chains. We're looking forward to working with the CGI centers and partners in Africa and across the world to advance our shared agenda in this. I'll turn it back to you, Inga. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Katie. And folks, this brings us to the end of the session. Apologies again for the rush breakout discussion, but I hope that you found the session useful and informative. Just to say a big thanks to my co-convener, Robert, for your assistance today, and to all the speakers, panelists, facilitators, note takers, Alison on the chat. Really, this was a big team effort, and thank you to you all. Thanks also to Nicolene Lowe, who has been madly trying to capture the proceedings in graphic format. And so as we close now, she will share the proceedings, and I see it on my screen. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Nicolene. Folks, this brings us to the end of the session. Hope you have a good day, good evening, and wish you a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.